Hello students, today we shall be taking up We Are Not Afraid to Die If We Can All Be Together by Gordon Cook and Alan East. This has been taken from your class 11 NCERT book Hornbill. Now before we start the reading and explanation, it is important that we know about Captain James Cook. Captain James Cook was an 18th century explorer and navigator. He made detailed maps of Newfoundland prior to making 3 voyages to the Pacific, and during which he achieved the first recorded European contact with the eastern coastline of Australia and the Hawaiian Islands, and the first recorded circumnavigation of New Zealand. So this map shows you the routes of Captain James Cook's voyages. The first voyage is shown in red, the second in green, and the third in blue. Now, why are we talking of James Cook? Because this chapter, the narrator of this chapter, Gordon Cook, in July 1976, along with his family, he set sail from Plymouth, England, to duplicate this round-the-world voyage, which was made more than 200 years ago by Captain James Cook. So that is why the reference to Captain James Cook was important here. All right, now let us talk of the characters. The narrator, Gordon Cook, his wife, Mary Cook, their 6-year-old son, Jonathan, and 7-year-old daughter, Suzanne. And then there are crewmen, American Larry Vigil and Swiss Herb Siegler. And you can also have a look at this Wave Walker. It's a professionally built boat, 23-meter and 30-ton wooden hulled beauty. Now let us have a look at the parts of a boat. Children, it is imperative for us to know the various parts of a boat when we are talking of this particular chapter, because this chapter is basically an adventurous ordeal at sea. Okay, so these terms will be used in the lesson. So I suggest to you all that you remember these technical terms. For instance, what's a starboard? It is the right side of a boat. Okay, what is the port? Left side of the boat. What is a hull? It is the body of a boat. What is a mast? What is a stern? What is a what is the front of a boat called? So all these things you should remember. So we start the chapter. In July 1976, my wife Mary, son Jonathan 6, daughter Suzanne 7, and I set sail from Plymouth, England, to duplicate the round-the-world voyage made 200 years earlier by Captain James Cook. For the longest time, Mary and I, 37-year-old businessman, had dreamt of sailing in the wake of the famous explorer, and for the past 16 years, we had spent all our leisure time honing our seafaring skills in British waters. So the first paragraph tells us that the author is a 37-year-old businessman and he is an adventurous person. He has been training himself and in fact the whole family they want to duplicate this round the world voyage which was made more than 200 years ago by Captain James Cook. And all the leisure time for the past 16 years that they had been using it for perfecting their skills of traveling by sea. Our boat Wave Walker, a 23-meter 30-ton wooden hulled beauty, had been professionally built, and we had spent months fitting it out and testing it in the roughest weather we could find. The first leg of our planned 3-year, 105,000-kilometer journey passed pleasantly as we sailed down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. There, before heading east, we took on 2 crewmen, American Larry Vigil and Swiss Herb Siegler, to help us tackle one of the world's roughest seas, the southern Indian Ocean. You can have a look at that map also and look at this beautiful Wave Walker. On our second day out of Cape Town, we began to encounter strong gales. Okay, what are gales? Wind basically, strong winds. For the next few weeks, they blew continuously. Gales did not worry me, but the size of the waves was alarming, up to 15 meters as high as our main mast. Now, this image of mast also you can see. Now, if the waves are as high as our mast, the fear is that we might drown, right? December 25 found us 3,500 kilometers east of Cape Town. Despite atrocious weather, we had a wonderful holiday complete with a Christmas tree. New Year's Day saw no improvement in the weather, but we reasoned that it had to change soon, and it did change for the worse. At dawn on January 2, the waves were gigantic. We were sailing with only a small storm jib and were still making 8 knots. Knot refers to the unit of speed in sea, children, and 1 knot is equal to 1.852 km per hour. As the ship rose to the top of each wave, we could see endless, enormous seas rolling towards us, and the screaming of the wind and spray was painful to the ears. Try to visualize the whole chapter. Try to visualize as I'm reading, you keep your eyes closed and try to visualize. You will really enjoy the chapter. To slow the boat down, we dropped the storm jib and lashed a heavy mooring rope in a loop across the stern. Then we double lashed rope in a loop across the stern. Then we double lashed everything, went through our life raft drill, attached lifelines, donned oilskins and life jackets, and waited. Okay, so all these meanings are given over there. Oilskins basically are the oilskin refers to a heavy cotton cloth that is waterproofed with oil. The first indication of impending disaster came at about 6 p.m. with an ominous silence. Ominous silence, you are anticipating that something unpleasant, something evil is going to happen. The wind dropped and the sky immediately grew dark. Then came a growing roar, and an enormous cloud towered aft of the ship. Aft is basically towards the stern of the ship. With horror, I realized that it was not a cloud, but a wave like no other I had ever seen. It appeared perfectly vertical and almost twice the height of the other waves, with a frightful breaking crest. Crest refers to the curling foamy wave. Now the tension is building up, children. Just try to visualize the whole scene if you can. It will be very good. The roar increased to a thunder as the stern moved up the face of the wave, and for a moment I thought we might ride over it. But then a tremendous explosion shook the deck. A torrent of green and white water broke over the ship. My head smashed into the wheel, and I was aware of flying overboard and sinking below the waves. I accepted my approaching death, and as I was losing consciousness, I felt quite peaceful. Now, this particular sentence really alarms the reader, and he thinks that the narrator is something bad is going to happen to the narrator. Let us see. Unexpectedly, my head popped out of the water. A few meters away, Wave Walker was near capsizing, her masts almost horizontal. Then a wave hurled her upright. My lifeline jerked taut. I grabbed the guardrails and sailed through the air into Wave Walker's main boom. Subsequent waves tossed me around the deck like a rag doll. My left ribs cracked, my mouth filled with blood and broken teeth. Somehow I found the wheel, lined up the stern for the next wave, and hung on. Water, water everywhere. I could feel that the ship had water below, but I dared not abandon the wheel to investigate. Now, here, please remember, please observe the behavior of the narrator. Okay, the narrator's willpower is strong, he is focused, and he is determined to tackle this situation. Suddenly, the front hatch was thrown open. Hatch refers to a door in a submarine, students. And Mary appeared. "We are sinking," she screamed. "The decks are smashed. We are full of water." "Take the wheel," I shouted as I scrambled for the hatch. Now, remember, his ribs are all broken. So, scrambled means he ran quickly using hands and feet both. Also, because they are sinking and the whole ship is full of water. Larry and Herb were pumping like madmen. Broken timbers hung at crazy angles. The whole starboard is basically the right hand side of the ship, children, the opposite of the port side. Okay, so the broken timbers hung at crazy angles. The whole starboard side bulged inwards. Clothes, crockery, charts, tins, toys sloshed about in deep water. Sloshing is, all these things were moving through the liquid, through the water with a splashing sound. I half swam, half crawled into the children's cabin. "Are you all right?" I asked. Yes, they answered from an upper bunk. But my head hurts a bit, said Sue, pointing to a big bump above her eyes. I had no time to worry about bumped heads. After finding a hammer, screws, and canvas, I struggled back on deck. With the starboard side bashed open, we were taking water with each wave that broke over us. If I couldn't make some repairs, we would surely sink. So, as a father, he is not a father right now, okay? He is the captain and he has to save the ship. Somehow I managed to stretch canvas and secure waterproof hatch covers across the gaping holes. Some water continued to stream below, but most of it was now being deflected over the other side. Okay, so deflected means going to the other side, went in the other direction. More problems arose when our hand pumps started to block up with the debris floating around the cabins and the electric pump short circuited. So, one problem they are solving, they haven't even solved the first problem and the second problem arises. So you can see the water level rose threateningly. Back on deck, I found that our two spare hand pumps had been wrenched overboard. Wrenched is destroyed, along with the forestay sail, the jib, the dingies, and the main anchor. Then I remembered we had another electric pump under the chart room floor. Chart room, children, is a room in the ship where we keep all these things like charts, maps, instruments, etc. I connected it to an outpipe and was thankful to find that it worked. So they had to continue with all this. So the night dragged on with an endless, bitterly cold routine of pumping, steering, and working the radio. We were getting no replies to our Mayday calls, which was not surprising in this remote corner of the world. So Mayday calls are those international, radio signals which are used by ships or aircraft. Sue's head had swollen alarmingly. She had two enormous black eyes, and now she showed us a deep cut on her arm. When I asked why she had not made more of her injuries before, she said, I didn't want to worry you when you were trying to save us all. So please understand that children are equally strong and they are exhibiting exemplary courage. By morning on January 3, the pumps had the water level sufficiently under control for us to take 2 hours rest in rotation. But we still had a tremendous leak somewhere below the waterline. And on checking, I found that nearly all the boats. Alright, so what is the waterline here? The level which is normally reached by the water on the side of the ship. So now let us see what is wrong with this. Main rib frames were smashed down to the keel. Keel refers to the base of the ship. In fact, there was nothing holding up a whole section of the starboard hull except a few cupboard partitions. We had survived for 15 hours since the wave hit, but Wave Walker couldn't hold together long enough for us to reach Australia. I checked our charts and calculated that there were two small islands a few hundred kilometers to the east. So now children understand that they have to reach any of these islands very fast if they want to save themselves. Because the wave walker is not in a position to, carry on like this. One of them, Isle Amsterdam, was a French scientific base. Our only hope was to reach these pinpricks in the vast ocean. Pinpricks refers to something which is very extremely small. But unless the wind and seas abated, so we could hoist sail, our chances would be slim indeed. The great wave had put our auxiliary engine out of action. So our supplementary, that is the engine that was kept in reserve, is not also is the great wave had put our auxiliary engine out of action, means that it is not working. On January 4, after 36 hours of continuous pumping, imagine children pumping water out of the ship for continuous 36 hours is no joke. We reached the last few centimeters of water. Now we had only to keep pace with the water still coming in. We could not set any sail on the mainmast. Pressure on the rigging would simply pull the damaged section of the hull apart. So we hoisted the storm jib and headed for where I thought the two islands were. Mary found some corned beef and cracker biscuits, and we ate our first meal in almost 2 days. But our respite was short-lived. At 4 p.m., black clouds began building up behind us. Within the hour, the wind was back to 40 knots. Remember, 40 knots. And the seas were getting higher. The weather continued to deteriorate throughout the night, and by dawn on January 5, our situation was again desperate. So their situation was again desperate. When I went in to comfort the children, John asked, "Daddy, are we going to die?" I tried to assure him that we could make it. "But, Daddy," he went on, "we aren't afraid of dying. If we can all be together, you and Mummy, Sue and I." So can you see now the title has been taken from this child's dialogue. I could find no words with which to respond, but I left the children's cabin determined to fight the sea with everything I had. So, these words of this boy, yes, the son's words really affected him, and he is all the more determined to fight the sea with whatever he has. To protect the weakened starboard side, I decided to heave to. Heave to here refers to, come to a stop, especially by turning across the wind, leaving the head sail backed. To protect the weakened starboard side, I decided to heave to with the undamaged port hull facing the oncoming waves using an improvised sea anchor of heavy nylon rope and two 22-liter plastic barrels of paraffin. So this is how he decides to uh, protect the ship. That evening, Mary and I sat together holding hands as the motion of the ship brought more and more water in through the broken planks. We both felt that the end was near. But Wave Walker rode out the storm, and by the morning of January 6, with the wind easing, I tried to get a reading on the sextant. Sextant is an instrument which is used for measuring the angular distance between objects, and it is used for navigation purposes. Back in the chart room, I worked on wind speeds, changes of course, drift and current in an effort to calculate our position. The best I could determine was that we were somewhere in 150,000 kilometers of ocean looking for a 65-kilometer wide island. While I was thinking, Sue, moving painfully, joined me. The left side of her head was now very swollen and her blackened eyes narrowed to slits. She gave me a card she had made. On the front, she had drawn caricatures of Mary and me with the words, "Here are some funny people. Did they make you laugh?" I laughed a lot as well. Inside was a message, "Oh, how I love you both." So this card is to say, thank you and let's hope for the best. Somehow we had to make it. So observe the behavior of the children. Okay, in such a situation, they are not losing any hope. They are quite hopeful. Deep inside their hearts, we can see that there is a hope that we are going to make it. And that hope perhaps, has given courage to the narrator. I checked and rechecked my calculations. We had lost our main compass and I was using a spare which had not been corrected for magnetic variation. I made an allowance for this and another estimate of the influence of the westerly currents which flow through this part of the Indian Ocean. About 2 p.m., I went on deck and asked Larry to steer a course of 185 degrees. If we were lucky, I told him with a conviction I did not feel, he could expect to see the island at about 5 p.m. Now, this is a captain who is telling the person to steer a course of 185 degrees, and he also says that if we were lucky, we will see the island at about 5 p.m. Then, with a heavy heart, I went below, climbed on my bunk, and amazingly dozed off. Imagine he must be so tired. When I woke, it was 6 p.m. and growing dark. I knew we must have missed the island. And with the sail we had left, we couldn't hope to beat back into the westerly winds. At that moment, a tousled head appeared on my bunk. "Can I have a hug?" Jonathan asked. Sue was right behind him. "Well?" Why am I getting a hug now? I asked. Because you are the best daddy in the whole world. And the best captain, my son replied. Not today, John, I'm afraid. Why, you must be, said Sue in a matter-of-fact voice. You found the island. What? I shouted. It's out there in front of us, decorous, as big as a battleship. I rushed on deck and gazed with relief at the stark outline of Isle Amsterdam. It was only a bleak piece of volcanic rock with little vegetation, the most beautiful island in the world. Now, the captain described Isle Amsterdam as the most beautiful island in the world because he and the crew had been saved because the island was within reach. Had this island not been within reach, they would not have been able to save lives. We anchored offshore for the night, and the next morning all 28 inhabitants of the island cheered as they helped us ashore. With land under my feet again, my thoughts were full of Larry and Herbie, cheerful and optimistic under the direst stress, and of Mary, who stayed at the wheel for all those crucial hours. Most of all, I thought of a 7-year-old girl who did not want us to worry about a head injury, which subsequently took 6 minor operations to remove a recurring blood clot between skin and skull, and of a 6-year-old boy who was not afraid to die. So now if we talk of the theme of this story, children, this story has a string of themes woven into it. One, of course, is where there is a will, there is a way. Strong willpower and determination is the key to success in this story. The strong, indomitable spirit of the narrator and his family helped them in taking up the sea adventure courageously. When the weather was rough, they stayed calm and optimistic. And this streak of adventurism is found in everyone in this story. Now, remember that it is the human nature to explore the unknown and take up challenges. So, you can think of some more themes that come to your mind. And I would like to conclude this chapter by saying that all's well that ends well. Also, I would like to ask you, how many of us have this adventurous streak in us? Most of us have, but do we explore it? So keep challenging yourselves, students, and keep trying something different on you. On that beautiful note, I would like to end my presentation here. Thank you for watching.